no further than the Graveborn.
My God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Tiny Tina's Wonderland. Oh my God, ladies and gentlemen, we kind of in some ways have summoners, but everyone can kind of be a summoner, but one buffs them and the other one produces a lot more summons. It's a little complicated. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be breaking down the brand new trailer, the Graveborn and the Spore Warden. These are two new classes that both kind of function around summoning to some extent, also like leeching health off of yourself and things like that. We're also going to be dipping our toes into things like multi-classing and only having one action skill when you can get another class and merge it with your own and things like that, as well as going deep diving into both of these new characters, which I'm so excited for. And damn, this makes the choice so much harder. But ladies and gentlemen, let me talk about the one that I'm the most excited for, the Graveborn, which it seems like a lot of you guys are as well. The Graveborn is essentially a dark mage, a dark magic user, functioning around the idea of course, life-stealing dark blood magic. The idea that when you use your abilities, they're going to siphon health from you, and also when enemies die around you, you are going to be benefiting from those. Of course, we know these in Borderlands as kill skills. Now, what is the Graveborn's action skill? His first one is Reaper of Bones. When you have this activated, you start draining HP, but you also have lifesteal, so you actually can repair your HP as it drains. And it also increases your magical damage. So it doesn't specify anywhere that it's gun damage, so just be careful with that. It may not be a class that you want to pair with someone who's not going to also amplify magic. And then we have Dark Sacrifice, the one we've been seeing all the time in the trailers. It's essentially going to explode in a massive mess of blood, doing some AoE damage to everybody, but is going to cost 20% of whatever health you currently have, which is pretty interesting. Now, the Graveborn's feat, or special passive talent, that is always going to be with him regardless of the action skill you choose, this Floating Lich King, which we'll talk about more when we get deeper into the character analysis. But what's important to know about this thing is every single time you cast any ability, you are going to have a chance for your little lich to summon something himself or to do an instance of unique damage, whatever that means, which could be so cool and so good. It's a way of being a summoner without having to entirely devote yourself to being not a summoner. You have a companion that is a summoner, and you're feeding it power every single time you cast a spell, enabling you to potentially have a battlefield running around with the Lich King summons. So cool. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this to me has so much insight into what the Graveborn will be. And just a spoiler alert, he definitely seems like the summoner class, but not quite. Like a different version of what the summoner could be. Again, it's kind of a tell here, but there's these summons right by his feet. But it's going to be something where I think it's kind of like being a summoner in the best of both worlds, where essentially your summons are going to be just constantly happening kind of at random. And you're going to be able to do some like blood magic and like base magic casting on the side whilst your lich kind of does the summoning whilst you do the damaging, but you still are surrounded by enemies that are all working for you. Awesome. Anyways, the other one is more of a buffing up your individual summons itself. If that makes any sense. We'll get into that in a minute. But what is the Graveborn? Graveborns are death-touched occultists who sacrifice health to unleash devastating dark magic attacks and become phantasmal reapers of bones, accompanied by their manic demi-lich companion. Devotees of death, Graveborns draw strength from the pain and passing of others, growing in power as they send the souls of their enemies screaming into the void. Where most fear death, the Graveborns revel in it, and have even made it an ally, aided by the powerful and ancient demi-lich bound to their service. The Graveborn knows all power comes at a price paid in blood, whether it be that of their foes or of their own. So hello, me back. Hey, we're back. What do you call it? Them saying that it's like aided by a powerful ancient demi-lich. I think this is going to have a big part and play a big part in this skill tree. So I should explain that. The passive ability for the Graveborn is this Lich, and what this Lich does, that's pretty iconic, is every single time you cast a casting ability, you are going to have a subsequent cast by the Demi-Lich. So essentially, this could be summons, this could be spells, this could be whatever. I could see also there being something in the skill tree where every single time you get a kill, there's a chance for your for your Lich to cast something, whether it's just a damage instance or whether it's a summon or something like that. Because yeah, again, I think that's possible just because of the like little hydras here. I think this is what the devs were referring to as the like summoner class, because he's kind of like a overlord or a lich, reveling in the death and like zombification of others, essentially. When things die, you bring back things to work for you. That's at least what the lich is doing. Anyways, let's continue with the class information. The Graveborn is a master of kill skills, spells, and dark magic. So this is not going to be a character you're necessarily going to be playing if you want to go guns or like some sort of weird melee thing. Yeah. They use their Demi-Lich Companion and sacrificial action skills to enact suffering upon their enemies, even at the cost of their own life force. Any spell cast by the Graveborn will cause the Demi-Lich to cast a unique spell of their own. A unique spell of their own, as well as trigger kill skills to summon hellish minions. So, I'm not even sure if it's needed if you're like killing an enemy and you have another chance for your Lich to cast something, because it's anytime you cast a spell. Your Graveborn will cause the Demi-Lich to do a unique spell. Now, who knows? Maybe we get in the game, our Lich's spells suck ass. It's literally nothing. But it could also be pretty dope. And also, it's passive damage in the background, whilst you're already getting a lot from buffing up yourself, buffing up your magic specifically with the various action skills given to you. By the way, spoiler alert, you can only use one action skill at a given time. So, a little unfortunate there. I think I'm going to go with the one that gives me increased magical damage and the other thing. Although dual casting magic would be pretty dope as well. That's kind of shitty that we have to choose between those two. Ugh. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Graveborn. This class is like a black magic, blood magic user, which is going to drain HP and gain benefits. It's also going to be very similar to Zane, who had like a shit ton of kill skills. And those kill skills are not going to just be like, get a little bit of movement speed, do a little bit more damage. It's going to be, no, your Lich is going to summon different creatures into the battlefield, and you're going to be just seeing like random things pop off, like an electric chain hit out of nowhere. Whilst you're just doing your own thing, your Lich is going to be its own like tank, it seems like, constantly outputting and doing things. Also, because he's a floating enemy, it doesn't look like he's going to get downed, or at least it seems like he'll get downed less. But needless to say, I am absolutely hyped. This class seems like a just good pick overall, because it's going to amplify damage and it's going to give you the ability to specialize in other things if you want, because you're not going to have to manage being the summoner. You're just going to have to empower your Lich to keep summoning himself, which is just to cast abilities, which is why I think the mage class is going to go really well with him, because he's probably going to replenish mana and stuff like that. I digress. Also, the Demi-Lich could have a cooldown and could ruin the whole thing. Anyways, Spore Warden, baby! Let's go! I'm sorry, I'm just like, it's so much potential and possibilities. These also could be shit, but hopefully not. It could be really nerfed and significantly less cool, like most summons in every other video game are. Oh, please. Alright, now let's talk about the Spore Warden, which is a very, very interesting class. Essentially, he has two action skills. One of them is an arrow barrage, or a barrage of arrows. And the other action skill he has is basically being able to summon forth 3 crazy cyclones that will just sweep across the map, doing a lot of damage to the surrounding enemies, which both sound pretty OP. Really, really good. But he's also accompanied by a very, very gassy little mushroom. And on the website, which we're about to jump into, it specifically talks about him being able to buff your allies, but also your companions. So we'll get into that in a hot minute. Let's jump into the deep dive of what the Spore Warden actually is. Spore Wardens are masters of nature who summon tornadoes and launch volleys of arcane arrows into enemy lines alongside their toxic spewing mushroom companion. He rips ass, is what they're saying by toxic spewing. Ass ripping, all that. The Spore Wardens are swift guardians of the Wonderland's magical wildernesses, deeply in tune with the natural world. Spore Wardens prowl through the forest and bog alongside their faithful, flatulent mushroom companion. Spore Wardens are able to annihilate their foes from afar, showing off their mastery of both conventional firearms and mystical summoning bow that unleashes a barrage of arcane arrows. So this character has a couple ways to divvy it up. Any sort of range damage, guns are on the table, and also your summoning action skill bow is also on the table, which is pretty cool. Let's continue. Spore Wardens are guns and companion specialists. Now, I thought that maybe meant allies, but it continues to say, they can significantly boost the abilities of their companions and allies, while laying down withering firepower and slowing advancing enemies with frost tornadoes. Speed and distance are the Spore Warden's best friend. Okay, this is the class I want to know more about, because this class seems like it might be the... It seems like the Gearbox is trying to do a catch-all of all these things, where they're saying, hey, how about instead of just buffing, you know, your companions, your summons, if you will, maybe you're also going to be buffing your allies, so that way it's not just one thing that's maybe not as powerful. This way you'd be the best friend if you're playing co-op, and all those things. Also, you're getting a really good bow. It kind of makes sense for the realistic summoner kind of archetype, where essentially you're going to be just imbuing your companions to profit and hit hard. And it doesn't look like there's any sort of skill like Flax Gamma Burst, which was kind of like the only way to make your companions actually deal substantial damage, but it was only for a set duration of time. It doesn't look like that's attached, so instead it just says you're going to support your allies, your summons and allies, and you have access to a barrage of arrows, which you can hit from far, so when your companions are dogpiling enemies, you're going to be a couple feet back, just laying them in with arrows, slowing them down so they can't get on you, and also slowing them down so your companions don't just get their head knocked in, but also a tornado, which the tornado, man, why do they do this? They gave you a tornado, dude, and it just blankets the whole field, just wrecking people. Or you can get a little bow, which the bow seems cool. But come on, just summon an arrow, like your companions are getting overwhelmed, you snap your fingers and they're in like a fucking tornado gust? Are you shitting me? That's too cool. That's too cool not to pick the tornado gust. Anyway. Also, it does look like from various things we've seen in the trailers that the action skills could ebb and flow in slight ways, be like slightly modified. Like I could see the archer maybe not firing a volley of arrows, but firing like 5 or 10 in succession. And then being on cooldown rather than just throwing out a burst. You could probably throw maybe like one big tornado rather than like 6 spread out ones. Maybe you could throw in like the ability for your tornadoes to like spew out rocks and kind of be turrets at a certain point. That could exist. I don't know if it exists. It seems like it should. But anyways, so now let's go into what is to me really pertinent information if you want to get into this game. So first things first is each one of the classes, the Berserker, Clawbringer, Graveborn, every one of those classes. So each class has 2 action skills, but they also have this thing called a class feat. Now that is going to be a substantial increase in some sort of status, essentially, like critical rate, or like a specific elemental damage, maybe, things like that. But it also will be companions. So you can specialize into 2 classes feats that have companions attached to them and have 2 companions chilling with you as you're entering into the world. Now, we have no idea if companions are actually good enough to be, you know, better than like 30% or 20% more critical rate, which some would argue is what the Stabomancer might be giving, who knows. But regardless, this is how the system works. 2 action skills, 1 feat. The feat can be a companion, or it can be a static increase, like critical rate increase, and etc., stuff like that. Now, at some point in the story, you're going to have to pick another class to hybrid, but that does not mean you have to go into that said class. At least that's what it seems like. It seems like you could just go in there to get, like, if you wanted to keep going with the spell shot, but you thought, oh shit, it's so nice to have 20% more critical rate or a bonus to critical rate, so I'm just going to pick the Stabomancer, not planning on investing any skill points in there, because there's still so much more value to get out of the spell shot, and this way I'll have like the 20% critical rate, which could affect my spells and make it hit even harder. Maybe you're like, wait, I'm playing the spell shot, and the passive buff for the Graveborn, which is just going to have this Lich that's constantly just throwing out his magic whenever I do a magic ability, then boom, I am like, this is just a snake eating its own tail perfectly, I'll get that one, which I think would be a good idea. But anyways, so these things can kind of play with each other even if you're not going to necessarily get them. Now, there is something to note. All the way down here, I believe it tells you. So at some point in the story, you're going to have access to multi-classing. I don't know if that means you level up enough or if it just happens in the story like Tina says, fuck it, here's another thing. I don't know. But what they do say is when you get to endgame, when you finish the story, then you are going to be able to pick whatever class you want. But please note, this does not change the ability for your #1 picked class when you started the game. So you will need to do multiple playthroughs still. So yeah, when you get to endgame, you'll be able to choose another class if you maybe made a wrong choice. But it will say your primary class, which is the one you choose at the very beginning of the game, will be forever. So you'll have to do multiple playthroughs if you wanted to have like the spell shot and then mixing him with everything, which I think would be a good idea. Even though I really do want to go Graveborn, I feel like I might just do a cuz and may have to reap my shittiness outside of that. Also, Borderlands 2 on PC is always nice because you can download save files, so you might not need to do all that bullshit. Anyway, okay, so this is to me a little bit of a bummer. Maybe we have 2 action abilities, probably not, but we'll see. Your chosen class action skill have the biggest impact on your moment-to-moment gameplay, with splashy effects that can instantly turn the tides of battle. Action skills have a relatively short cooldown, so you'll be able to unleash them pretty consistently, but not back-to-back probably, but not in a short amount of time yet. You can equip 1 action skill at a time, though. You'll have a total of 4 to choose from with the multi-class. This, to me, is a little unfortunate. I think it would be perfect if you had like Zane's thing, where it's like 1 and then 2. But I understand that like when you have 2, you run out of buttons, I guess, and you need like your grenades replaced. I think that's okay. I'd rather like give me the option to replace my grenade for an action skill if I needed to. Because maybe it's better or scales worse. Who knows? Maybe I don't want that, and it's just nice to have the option if you ever buff it in the future. But needless to say, very, very happy and hopeful. Very hopeful is the best way I could phrase it. That maybe they change that, but no, as of right now, it says you can only equip 1 action skill at a time out of 4. So that doesn't mean you can do 2 or it's unfortunate you can only have 1 action skill. So for me, it's either the ability to cast 2 spells or to drain your HP, have lifesteal, and also deal increased magical damage. Pain. Pain, suffering, all that. Also, one of the things it mentions is every single time you level up, you're going to get a skill point, but you're going to get 2 things. You're going to get a skill point and then like a talent point. And you're going to be able to put these into any of the stats that you desire: strength, dexterity, intellect, wisdom, constitution, or attunement. Each one of these will affect various things. Intelligence most likely will be magic, stuff like that. Dexterity most likely critical damage, stuff like that. So it will increase your stats overall. And apparently when you start the game, you're going to have a run-up choice. So same as you start an RPG, you can choose if your background somehow led you to have a greater of one of these, whether it be strength, dexterity, intelligence, whatever. That will give you a running start in a direction. So maybe if you're planning on eventually pivoting and going into a dexterity build, then maybe you want to start that early and like kind of develop the magic, because that dexterity critical rate will always be valuable. Whereas the magic, maybe you just get more magic, it wouldn't make the most sense. What I do know, ladies and gentlemen, is I am absolutely juiced out of my goddamn mind. I'm revving to go. I can't wait. I really, really, really want to talk your guys' ear off about who the hell we should choose. I mean, there's no real should. It's just why should we pick what we pick? All the complete chaotic combinations that exist within that. I was really hoping it would be a lot more simplified in the summoner class, whereas now it seems like everyone can have like at the very least 2 little baby companions behind you, or at the very least, if you just want to have the Graveborn, you kind of have access to like more than just being a summoner. You have access to a lich that summons things, yes, but also will just throw out high damage every now and again. Every time you activate a spell, how hard is it to activate a spell? It seems like, yeah. I kind of think the build that I'll be going with is the Spellcaster and the Lich, just because they seem like they feed into each other, unless the Lich has a cooldown, which probably it does, but hopefully that is reduced in the skill tree somehow. Even if it's not that powerful, it'd be cool to see like 1,000 of these little hydras all over the map throwing a bunch of weird spitted enemies while you're shooting them with a gun and dying profusely. Also, that would increase their damage potentially, because it increases the destructive damage of you. But with that being said, though, they also throw in a curveball with the Spore Warden, where it seems like it seems like he's a summoner buffer. So to me, I'm like, is this the path if you want to like buff up 1 or 2 of your summons and maybe your allies on top? but maybe it's not as like damage centered as the Graveborn, which is seemingly like more of a horde. Like, so if this is the person that buffs one singular target up a lot, or the horde. I think the horde in Borderlands is probably better to have 1,000 liches just throwing shit around and crazy casts and AoEs fire on the ground which your lich can spew out. I don't know if that's the thing, by the way. It just makes the most sense for what like kind of spells he would throw out. If he's purely summoning based, and if you can somehow in the Grave Warden skill tree amplify that, like make it so that your lich is like just a lich summoner at this point, and just constantly outputting enemies, I'm in. I'm so in. And if there's any spell in the game, which we know that there are, like, at the very least, summonable hydras, little tiny little snake things that pop out of the ground, then yeah, that's perfect. But with that being said, though, if that's the way summoning works in the game, then maybe it is best to just go with the Spore Warden, who's just you're gonna use a bunch of your magic on summoning ads, and then you're gonna buff them up as much as you possibly can, and then just see them wreck. But I do feel like the Spore Warden, the Graveborn, is more of a way to kind of be like, I want to be a summoner, but I just don't want to sit there and watch the whole time. I want to sit there and like cast some spells and also help, essentially. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely excited. I cannot wait to play this game. I cannot wait to talk to you guys more about it. I definitely want to make another video talking about the like pros and cons of certain characters and what would be fun to mix and mash. Let me know what you guys think though, but I do plan on making that video because it's going to be too much fun, I think. But yeah, but alas, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully I can see you in that video. Thank you so much for your time. Hopefully you do enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye, ladies and gentlemen.